Syria accuses the American-led coalition of killing 45 civilians in recent airstrikes, while the US Central Command admits there may have been casualties. And civilians begin to leave the embattled city of Aleppo via safe exit corridors set as part of a Russian-Syrian relief operation. Weapons are reportedly stolen from a US military base in the German city of Stuttgart, despite tightened security in the wake of the recent terror attacks. Hello there, it's just turned 2 p.m. here in the Russian capital. You're watching RT International with me, Nikki Aaron. Syria's foreign ministry has urged the UN to condemn US-led airstrikes on Thursday, which it says left 45 civilians dead and another 50 injured. In a letter sent to the United Nations, Syria compared the bombings to atrocities committed by Islamic State. The raids on a town held by ISIL came less than 2 weeks after another coalition airstrike is said to have killed dozens of civilians. Gayane Chichikan has the details.
U.S. Central Command said late on Thursday it had, I'm quoting here, initiated an assessment following internal operational reporting that a strike today near Manbij, Syria, may have resulted in civilian casualties, end quote. Again, this is U.S. reaction to the latest strike on Thursday. On Wednesday, the U.S. said there was sufficient credible evidence of civilian deaths in another strike, which the U.S. carried out last Monday, also near the city of Manbij. It reportedly killed dozens. So the U.S. is now investigating civilian casualties in a number of U.S. strikes in Syria that happened in less than 2 weeks. Last week, when I asked the State Department whether the U.S. thought the strike in Manbij last Monday was a mistake, State Department's John Kirby seemed visibly irritated with my question.
The U.S. strike that reportedly killed around 20 civilians in the ISIL-held city of Manbij in Syria, was it a mistake on Monday?
That's another great accusatory question you've asked here. No other military works as hard as ours. None. No other military in the world to prevent civilian casualties. And when they happen, again, I'll say it again because apparently it didn't sink in the first time. When it happens, we investigate it fully and completely. And then we're transparent about it. And then we take the lessons learned and we try to prevent it from happening again. Just to be clear, one is one too many.
While State Department's John Kirby says the U.S. views one civilian casualty as too many, we see reports from Syria saying U.S. strikes killed dozens. The U.S. acknowledges that the strikes happened. It is now assessing how many civilians it estimates may have died in those strikes.
Earlier, my colleague Neil Harvey spoke to the editor of the Pan-African Newswire, Abayomi Azikiwe. He said, judging past experience, it's unlikely those responsible for the deaths will be held to account.
The major problem that the United States has in carrying out these airstrikes and other operations in Syria is that they're not working with the Syrian government in Damascus. So as long as they continue to not work with the Syrian government, we're going to see more and more of these attacks that result in civilian casualties.
This isn't the only attack that's created these kind of civilian casualties. On 19th of July, US airstrikes in pretty much the same area also reportedly killed a large number of civilians. The US and Russian ambassadors have both given statements on that this week. We can have a quick listen.
The United States will carefully and thoroughly review any and all credible information, including information from organizations within Syria that document harm to civilians and that are also trying now to investigate these events.
I was rather surprised by my American colleague's answer to a question on mass civilian death in northern Syria. She said the investigation will be based on information from Syrian civil society groups. So far, it seems that there are no American drones, no special operatives of the US or its allies in Syria, and no videos of airstrikes, even though all modern bombers capture videos when they conduct strikes. I don't want to believe that the military state of the US-led coalition is that bad. The reference to civil society groups makes me think that we will never know the truth, as everything will be swept under the carpet.
Nothing is ever done about it. We hear when it is exposed that there's going to be an investigation, but it is very rare to hear anything about any disciplinary activity being carried out against these U.S. soldiers and officers and commanders who are ordering these airstrikes.
Well, with me now in the studio is RT's William Whiteman to discuss this further. Will, how's the mainstream media been reacting to this news?
Well, I mean, we can have a look now at how the mainstream media is covering this. As you'll see, it's very selective. If we have a look at the BBC, you can see that there isn't really very much interest at all on the front page there. And then if we cross over to CNN, there's nothing really on the website, but there is something regarding Syria, which they broadcast on air. That's to do with the maternity hospital which was hit in Idlib province. And there's a blame here against Syrian government or potentially Russian involvement. We can have a look at this now.
In the Syrian city of Idlib, the Save the Children group says the bombing of a maternity hospital.
And then, I mean, if we have a look now, if there's anything on here about the US coalition airstrike on July the 28th, nothing at all. You don't see anything really on the BBC. There's only a slight mention on it on one of the articles. On CNN, there's nothing really there at all. But then here's the thing, when it comes to this Syrian government, it becomes a completely different affair. If we have a look now at some examples.
For more than half an hour on Sunday night, this town to the west of Aleppo came under sustained bombardment.
As disbelief still raged at how airstrikes could kill dozens at a hospital Thursday, it happened again. They say they're low on medicine, they're low on food, they're low on water. Deep concerns amongst aid workers that besieging could lead to intense starvation.
So there we have it. I mean, the problem is here, this is a horrific war, horrific humanitarian crisis which has been unfolding for years now. And really what is the worst thing to do is if you just cherry-pick the information which you think is essential to you and don't tell the true story, because how then are you actually going to bring about a proper resolution to the conflict?
It's interesting to see how different media organisations are covering the story, or not covering it, as you said. Yeah. RT's William Whiteman in the studio. Thanks, Will.
Thanks very much.
Well, elsewhere in Syria, relief efforts for the war-torn city of Aleppo have been gaining momentum. It follows a joint Russian-Syrian move to open up humanitarian corridors. The initiative has been welcomed by the UN Special Envoy for Syria.
We do welcome any initiative aimed at assisting civilian population in war zones, in conflict zones, particularly in Syria today.
Civilians have begun to leave the embattled city of Aleppo, despite some reports suggesting militants had been blocking the routes. Throughout the war, Aleppo has witnessed some of the fiercest fighting, with shelling continuing on almost a daily basis. It's all combined to change the face of the city once and forever. Once a thriving multicultural city, it was considered Syria's financial capital. Thousands have been killed in the battle for Aleppo, which started back in 2012. Its historic quarter, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, has suffered catastrophic damage. Meanwhile, one of the most notorious militant groups in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra, has announced a split from al-Qaeda, along with a new name. In a statement, its leader thanked al-Qaeda for its support and expressed hope that America and Russia would no longer have a reason to bomb his forces. But links to al-Qaeda are not the only reason al-Nusra is on the UN terror blacklist. Since 2012, the group's been repeatedly carrying out suicide bombings in Damascus and Aleppo, killing hundreds of civilians. They were also accused of beheading Christians and enlisting child soldiers. In 2014, the group took UN peacekeepers hostage, demanding to be taken off the terror blacklist. But that didn't happen. Kamal Alam, a research analyst focusing on Syria, believes the al-Nusra front is simply trying to buy time.
And the biggest thing that al-Nusra are trying to do is give a message to America that they're no longer affiliated with al-Qaeda, because al-Nusra see that the Americans have no other option but to work with the Russians and the Syrian governments, and that means coordinating airstrikes perhaps, intelligence, and also for humanitarian effort. So that means the game is up for al-Nusra. And by rebranding themselves, they're trying to show themselves they're no longer with al-Qaeda. There are a lot of al-Nusra sympathizers that back them in Western capitals, and they've been advising them. If you look at it, there's been a media campaign to advise al-Nusra how to look more moderate. Once they've changed their name, it'll take maybe a few weeks before the UN to act to put their name on the terrorist watch list. It might buy them a few weeks or a few months, but no matter how they perform on the battlefield, as long as the Syrian military keep retaking ground, I think the game will be up.